special guest this afternoon to serve on our panel. And we have Chairman Sharon Oliver. I was wrong, all right. Thank you. From the County Board of Supervisors, Dr. Scott Braybrand, Fairfax County Superintendent. Sandy Evans, our Fairfax County School Board member, representing the Nation District. Yes, she's in her district. And we have Armando Perry, the ombudsman, in Fairfax County Public Schools. So as we begin this journey around family engagement, we want you to know as parents and as PTA leaders, you're not in this journey alone. So we have a few questions that we're going to ask our panelists, and they're going to respond. And at the very end, we will have time for a few questions and answers. So the very first question. Welcome to our first Family and Community Engagement Conference in Fairfax County. Our theme of the conference is Facing the Future Together. Please explain how this theme resonates with you and what you envision for students and families in Fairfax County in the context of our theme.
Happy to go first. It was working for...
Hello? Yes.
That was working.
So, let me just say that how important it is in the county for us to work together, to support each other. Specifically, the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors working together with the school board. In Fairfax County, education is our #1 priority. If you ask any member of the board, it's not transportation, it's not human service, it is education. And that is because when you have a well-educated community, everything else falls out well. You have a well-educated community, you have kids who can go on to a higher education or trade, and then industry wishes to relocate in a place where they know they can find a workforce, and so jobs are available. We have a good quality of life for our community, and people in our community then are able to put back into the community, and that is a cycle that just works. So making sure that we are all working together, students in the schools, parents in our school system, but also individuals in the county, whether they have children or not, it's important that we all support our families. I'll give someone else a chance.
First of all, I want to thank the FCCPTA for hosting today. Oh,
Just take one mic.
all right. I want to thank the FCCPTA for hosting this, and I hope that this becomes a regular conference because we have so many important issues that we've discussed here today. I want to thank Sharon Oliver, Dr. Braybrand, and Armando Perry for being here as well for this conversation. The Fairfax County School Board and the Board of Supervisors worked together to create the One Fairfax Resolution, which was a guidepost for the future for both boards. And we worked together on that and will continue to work on the issue of equity throughout our county, and particularly in our school system. As far as the equity issue is concerned, this now has become a framework for us and an umbrella with which we can look at every issue that we face. Not too long ago, I'm on our CPDC committee, which looks at capital projects, and our committee said we need to look at our capital issues through the framework of One Fairfax. We need to make sure that our facilities are equitable throughout the school system. We need to make sure that our programs are equitable throughout the school system. So I do think that moving forward, this was an important statement for our boards to be making, and it's one that will endure for a very long time. So it's of fundamental importance to our students and to our community as well. So I know you have some more specific questions, but just as a general statement, that's where I would begin.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for being here. We really appreciate it. It's a chance to come out and connect. I love the conference. I mean, it's face-to-face, right? If you took all the letters, I think it's face-to-face is some of the most powerful communication. We have this age of technology and social media, but I'm not convinced yet that that is superior to just human beings in close contact having a conversation. You're not going to have strong schools without strong communities. You're not. Fairfax County has been blessed by having a strong school system, strong schools, but also strong communities that are engaged in schools, in transportation, in land use. This is an engaged community in Fairfax County. I think the future, though, is are we engaging everybody or just the same group again, and again? I think that's a challenge for school systems. I think it's a challenge for local government. I think it's a challenge for the PTA as well. And I'm sure many of you are in workshops where you're talking about those things. And even in other organizations, how do we connect people with institutions who maybe have become less likely necessarily to join associations or understand the power of how an association or a collective voice can move things forward, move the quality of life forward for themselves and for their families. So it's a great topic. We need to discuss it, and thanks for having me here. We need to be willing to try things differently, and one of the things we've tried differently this year is creating for the first time ever in Fairfax a parent and family ombudsman. And without further ado, here's Armando.
The master of the segue. First of all, I want to thank Jane and Renee for inviting me to be here today. It really is an honor. But I want to thank you all for being here, because having been a former PTA official in my own children's school and a booster parent and an officer in the booster club, I know we help schools, and that's all really important. But here's where the real benefit is. You're influencing the future because you're teaching your children how important it is to be involved in your schools. And your kids know it. They know you're here on Saturday, so thank you for taking that time, because your children are far more likely then to become PTA members and officers in the future. So good job keeping it going, right? I think the idea of team and working together is critical, and I guess the one idea that's in my new role, but also formally as a school principal, is recognizing that we can't do this job from the school point of view by ourselves. The school can't do everything to create success for students. We have to work with parents. We have to work with the community. We have to work with all the resources. And the best way that happens is when we've got shared responsibility and shared accountability for what is happening. And that happens with transparency and talking and communicating and setting expectations and goals and what do we want our children to achieve, and welcoming all points of view into that. Because the definition of student success varies from child to child, and it should. We should have 190,000 different definitions for student success in Fairfax County.
Yeah.
More than 20 years of research tells us that family engagement is important, and it matters no matter what a family income or background may be. In Fairfax County, we collaborate in many ways to provide access and opportunity to families to engage in the education of their student. From your point of view, where do you see opportunities for individuals to strengthen their partnerships between home, school, and the community? The second part, where do you see opportunities for PTA leaders?
Well, there are many opportunities, is the short answer. PTA has a fundamental role here, not just to have a PTA meeting. I mean, we all know, PTA meetings are one thing, but the events that they create and bring community together. Over the course of my time on the board and as a PTA president myself, and as an advocate, I've seen all kinds of creative approaches to drawing families in. Sometimes it's an international night, sometimes it's in the evening, sometimes it's in the daytime. I've seen PTAs be very creative and not just assuming that everyone wants to come in the evening to an event. The other thing is asking people to come in to our parent resource centers. More and more of our schools now have parent resource centers where the parents are invited in to learn about things. So they aren't volunteering themselves at that point. They are gaining knowledge, something that's valuable to them, whether it's computer skills or whether it's information about opportunities in the community. And I think where we will ultimately head is with more community schools, combining with the county and not having our services siloed. The community doesn't end at the schoolhouse door, it continues at the schoolhouse door, and our school and our education continues in the community. So I think the more that we combine our community services and our school services, the better off we will be. And that way, that's another way that we can draw parents into the school and into their children's lives. So I think it's a two-way street, is I guess what I'm saying. You've got parents who will volunteer and bring in, and that will help their family, but we also help families and then draw them into the school community. So, and there are a lot of examples of that. So I'll pass this on to Dr. Brabrand to talk a little bit more about some of the opportunities. Yes, I will mention parent liaisons. Parent liaisons are critically important to our schools because they help families, in particular families who may not entirely be comfortable when they first enter a school for whatever reason. Parent liaisons are, I think we're going to have a question about that in a minute, but I'm a big believer in the role of parent liaisons in helping families become engaged in the school community.
Well, thank you, Sandy. Those were great comments. I mean, I think a couple of things. One, engagement. 20 years of research says that these relationships matter, and I think we've got to figure out, one, is setting collective expectations between the PTA and the school and the community. One of the things we've told principals this year for the first time, an expectation. I'm just telling you, first time, doesn't mean it hasn't been happening, but we just said it at all of our Leaders Need to Know conferences this year. We expect you to communicate with your community weekly. So if it's not happening, you need to give your principal a call and go, hey, Dr. Brabrand said I should be hearing something from you. And conversation needs to be two-way. PTA is a way for the principal and for the school system to hear back from you. What are your expectations for how you're going to communicate with the schools, the school board, even the board of supervisors? Are those clear? So I do think there's ways to talk about, and how do you want to bring people together and to know what the message is to share. How do you bring groups of parents together to do it? I still think, and again, I don't have all the answers. I was telling Debbie Kirkpatrick and Laura earlier, I don't have all the answers, but when you go into a school, it can be daunting. We assume everybody understands the Fairfax. I don't even care. We have people from all over the world. We also just have people who come in from other places. To understand Fairfax County Public Schools, oh my gosh! I just joined a gym 3 hours ago, and they said, you know what? Before you're really going, I need to find that work-health balance. Caring culture is one of our goals in the system, so I'm gonna care for my own health and physical fitness. But they said, you know what, you're gonna have to sign up for an hour orientation to understand what we have. Does the PTA schedule with schools an hour orientation for parents that you all could create and go, well, you know, because staff's trying to run the building every day. Could you, these are just ideas, these are not edicts. But how do we create a way to help become a concierge for parents? That's what we're trying to do with the parent ombudsman, is handle problems. That's way past. Like, I just joined this gym. How does the PTA become a concierge to assist parents of all backgrounds to help access the school and the school system? And I think that part needs to be looked at. In some places, the PTA needs to rebrand. It's not just about fundraising. It's not just about 5 people who they've known each other since childhood because their kids have known each other since childhood. Those 5 people run the school and everybody else just watches. So I think the PTA has to also say today what it is and what it's not. I'll leave you with this as PTA folks. I'm such a big believer in the PTA. I may be biased, but I was a young boy. We moved to Newport News in 1971, right as Virginia integrated. Academy sprung up in our other neighborhood I could have walked to. Instead, I walked to our public elementary school. One of the first things, you know, you're a kid, you don't know. My dad became PTA president. And the vice president was an African-American man. It's, to be honest, in my childhood, it was the first time I saw my dad with an African-American man doing work together. And by 4th grade, he had a son named Scott, and we were in the same class together. So PTA wasn't just, you know, something nice to spend time. It was a message about these are our schools. Now that's, I know it's not 1971 anymore, but what's the moral meaning that the PTA wants to take forward now for parents? And I think part of it is wanting that student success for every child, and parents have to be at the table. And schools need help in getting parents to the table. We try things, but sometimes administrators are frustrated. Oh, we did this night, no one came. We need, sometimes the best way to be invited is by a fellow parent, not by the school administration, not by the school teacher. That is intimidating for me. So we need your best brainstorming, but I do think we need to relook at how we do engagement to get more voices and to work with schools to make them better.
So Dr. Brabrand kind of opened up personal stories and experiences. So let me just say that when I was a little kid, I was terrified at school. And I grew up in Baltimore. And I went to a Catholic school. And I remember, so we had Sisters of Charity with the great big starch hats, which were scary enough. And the building was big and scary. But I don't remember my parents being very involved in the school. And so I was kind of by myself. And I just was terrified. I was not a very good student when I was in elementary school. And I just remember those years as being scary years. They could have been better, I think, had my parents been more engaged. And had I guess, you know, been introduced a little bit better into the school. It had been incorporated a little bit more into our family life. PTAs are one of the critical organizations that exist in our community. And the importance of an organization can't be overstated. You may go through years where nothing much happens and people don't show up at meetings, but then when you have a crisis, people are there. And it really is important that you've got an organization and a structure so that you can have a voice and so that you can weigh in on issues in the community that, you know, are troubling. So, PTAs, civic and homeowner associations, these are organizations that really play a critical role. And sometimes I think people probably feel like, I belong to the PTA or the homeowner association, and this is just kind of a drag. But what you're doing is critical. You are serving in an organization that when you are needed, you are a network. You are a network for communication and for discussion and for working through issues and problems. I would just like to say one other thing, and that is the importance of parents and teachers and students, and the importance of making education relevant. So sometimes when a child is in the classroom, the child might, ask himself or herself, does this matter? Or how does this fit in with the real world? And a role of a good parent and a good teacher is to sort of pull in what's happening in the world, pull in what's happening in nature, climate change and environmental issues, political issues, things that are going on in the world, and how is that relevant to some of the basic education that you're learning in your schools, math. My daughter, Karen, lives in Seattle. She graduated from Robinson, but she got married, moved to Seattle, and she has 2 little boys. And she was back here for Christmas, and she did kind of a cool thing when we were shopping, and actually we visited Baltimore, where I was originally from, and so we stayed in a hotel together, and so we were shopping in one of the little shops, and Karen gave each of her kids, so they were 5 and 7 years old, $20, and she said, this is for the whole weekend that we're here, and so you can shop and buy things, but this is how much money you have. And so, boy, that sure did make math relative. And so when they were in the store, they were seeing things they wanted to have, but they realized they couldn't afford it, or they realized that if they bought it, it would be out of money. And so they had to sort of make a judgment about, the value of what they were buying and how they were going to budget. They were just little kids. So anyway, bringing, into your child's life, relevance. Why is this important? And how does school, or what I'm learning at school, how does this factor into what's happening in the world?
I don't think that I can emphasize enough the importance that Scott mentioned about relationships. The common joke among PTA is it's always the same small group of families that are doing the majority of the work, right? You all see, I see lots of heads nodding in agreement. I can't help but think of the power of having parents invite other parents just for that help. It's that personal connection. And I see more nods, which that tells me that it succeeds in your buildings. I think so. One of my past experiences was I was in charge of set construction for Woodson's Dessert on Broadway. If you've never seen it, it's in January. Great show. I'm no longer connected, but it's still a great show. But think about getting a couple of parents, moms and dads together, to build a set. And reaching out, the great success we had was when those of us who stood up to say, we'll take charge, we'll chair the committee, reached out to people we knew. Whether you knew they had construction strength or not is irrelevant, because there's always some help. It's about that personal connection. I think the challenges for PTAs today are with the increasing diversity of our school communities, is do we have those relationships outside of a group that I might identify with, whether it's socioeconomic, racial, cultural, religious, whatever my identity is. do I have relationships with those who are members of perhaps other communities that I can reach out to? So I guess the challenge is, if you're looking around and you don't see the representation, making that conscious effort, how do we reach out to some of the other communities in our school and invite them to support? To do that, you have to understand that other culture as well, and you have to understand what do they see as the parent role in education, right? And then I'm going to put on my principal hat for one more tip about how PTAs can support this. And I'm very proud that my former school PTA president, she's the current PTA president, but it's my former school, Kara Danner is here, so from Pine Springs, so representing Pine Springs, thank you. It's about the PTA's role in supporting the school administration in recognizing and supporting parents. One of the greatest benefits that PTA, they took so much weight off of my plate. And as a school principal, I think it was Scott who mentioned, or Sandy who mentioned how much has to be done at the school level, thank you, is when I knew that PTA said, we'll take care of the thank you, breakfast for volunteers, or we'll take care of this, that's such a weight off of a principal's plate, because we've got to manage not only the funding, but the scheduling. So when PTAs say, we'll step in and take this load from you and we'll support you, principals will be falling over themselves, saying, yes, let's get that recognition for volunteers. And they can be a volunteer with PTA, with school stuffing envelopes, stacking books or shelving books, whatever that volunteer opportunity is. But it's that personal connection, and then PTA is supporting those endeavors. Those would be, I guess, 2 ideas I'd share.
Follow up too, if I might. Actually, that prompted a thought about both the relationships or connections. I certainly agree about that. And one of the issues we had when I was PTA president at Sleepy Hollow Elementary School, which is just not too far from here, was there were a number of people who didn't have cars. So the PTA said, it was very hard for them to get to school events. It was very hard to get to PTA meetings. So the PTA offered rides. No one called. No one ever called. We couldn't figure that out. But a couple of us started just offering rides to people we knew who needed them. And that goes back to the relationship thing. It's one thing to offer it and put a number on a piece of paper. It's not the same as saying, hey, I can pick you up. So that the relationship piece is very important. And also finding out what someone's strengths are. Another example is the Men of Bryn Mawr Park. That's another one of my elementary schools. They started this organization thinking, let's be sure we get the dads involved. This is not just an organization for moms, PTA, and the school certainly can use a lot of help. And so they came up with a discrete project. They decided that they were going to fix up the outside. They were going to fix up the playground. And they did a whole lot of work. And they planned it from beginning to end. And that was something that played to those strengths and that also drew those families, those particular families in. And I think they continued that because they could see they had a lot of pride in the project that they had finished up. So just wanted to use those as examples of the relationship building. And one other idea that I've brought up a couple of times, I thought something back to Ray Brown about this. I've seen examples where schools have put washers and dryers in there. And that is something that brings people in. And something that I thought, do we ever do that? Do we ever do that in any of our schools for people who need it? And then people come in and there are organizations that will give you grants to do this. Sometimes people will come in and they will use it and then they'll volunteer at the same time. So it's just really fun.
Last year, both the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors and the school board adopted the One Fairfax policy. One Fairfax is a joint social and racial equity policy that commits the county and schools to intentionally consider equity when making policies or delivering programs and services. This sounds wonderful, but what does it mean? Can you give us examples of what the future may look like in 1 year, in 5 years? What do people in this room need to do to make the vision of One Fairfax a reality?
I talked a little bit about One Fairfax previously, and I do think that this is of fundamental importance. What it means is that every child, regardless of what school they attend, no matter what zip code they live in, will have access to the full array of programs that Fairfax County Public Schools has to offer. We need to make sure that every child has access to the advanced academics as well as remediation, if that's what they need, as well as to our world language programs. And this is something that we still need to be doing some work on. Another issue that I feel very strongly about, some of our schools, particularly our high poverty schools, have images that need changing. That we see gradeschools.org, for example, that they rate, and to my mind, that's very destructive. And we need to actively counter those types of misinformation. That's important to our kids. It's important to our schools. It's important to our kids. Some of these schools are doing phenomenal work, absolutely phenomenal work, and they're not getting the credit for it. So I think we need to do our part to communicate the amazing work that all of our schools do, particularly those that have a very high number of students with challenges. So that's one direction that I believe is of fundamental importance with One Fairfax.
So, preparing for this, I have an amazing staff and I get talking points, which I read. And then I have this habit, sometimes I'm just listening in the moment of what different people say, and then other stuff just comes out as people learn to just accept that it happens. Isn't it bad? I know. So I have some talking points, and I'm going to do those in a minute, but I'm just going to give you my immediate brainstorms. One Fairfax, first needs to start with the PTA. Do you have an equity lens? You know, when I start thinking about one of the things that, and I don't pretend to have all the answers, but to ask the question. You do membership dues. Why don't you make everybody a member, and then at the end of the year, people can donate based on what they feel the PTA's provided for them. Membership up front means you got to pay something. That already puts some people in awkward places. How about saying the PTA's for everyone? I don't know, just an idea. How do you commit in the PTA leadership at every school that the district says, we're going to have a diverse group of officers that represent men, women, white, represent the diversity of the school. And our schools are diverse in Fairfax. How to do that? So I think some of it is, how do the organizations that partner with schools also put a equity lens on their work too? We're doing a lot around this, and it's long overdue because we really do have equity issues. One of the biggest things, we've got a chief equity officer that did not exist before. It was chief academic and equity officer. After 2 months, I added equity, and now I'm focusing all on equity. Francisco Duran, who I think started off the conference. We put an equity liaison in every single school who's getting trained to have an equity lens to look at the work. And that equity means so many things. Some people are going to think race first. Some are going to think gender. Sometimes it's religion. Sometimes it's the length of a bus ride or access to certain programs, like Ms. Evans said. There's so many pieces to it. So we have an equity liaison at every school being trained. We have a specialist for every region to help go support schools that are working on equity issues. We've got to help, though, create the conditions. Here's something I think the PTA can do, is create conditions for us to be comfortable, to have uncomfortable conversations. And I take the personal back. I think the PTA's biggest moment in my life, it's not somewhat uncomfortable that Virginia was integrating their schools. The PTA said it's time to get comfortable about being uncomfortable about that happening. What is that look like for the PTA today? And I think one of the things we're gonna do is more than even we have before is get very honest about transparency of our data, our academic data, our discipline data. We have real gaps. We have gaps with our African American kids, our special ed kids, our Latino kids. We have some gaps. Our biggest gap for our Latino kids is our graduation rate. So we have to start to take that lens and then say, what are we going to do to respond? I want to leave the PTA with one other thought. Now that I left and went away and came back, as much as the school system message, which I told you I'm pushing to have principals send it out, we're working on revamped communications both to support the school board and them getting out messages and how each principal does that, and just the quality of the multiple ways, Twitter, Facebook, all those ways. Word of mouth is still the most powerful way. How can the PTA create their own word of mouth meetings? They don't have to happen at schools. They can happen in people's homes. No one said the PTA's meeting always has to be at a school. How do you get in different parents' houses and talk about what the issues are for your members? And the more that, I think the more that you do that, I mean, now that's personalizing it. Once you're in somebody's house, that's, or it's a community center. We have community centers, or we have places that people can convene, libraries. Getting people comfortable and making them feel that you're an organization and that we're a school system that's going to be all inclusive. Not maybe, not based on income, not based on your religious beliefs or race. And I still think we have work to do in making everybody feel welcome. And part of One Fairfax is saying we've got to start to make that lens the first thing we're thinking about, and not just one of many factors. So I think you're going to see a lot of differences over the next few years as we get in front, and we need your help, partly to create the permission to get comfortable to having uncomfortable and not have it veer out of, I mean, to be honest, veer out of control and go, we need to raise these issues without it becoming a shouting match or pointing fingers. But how do we bring parents together? The PTA has been through things nationally and statewide that were very divisive, but the PTA was a unifying force. And how can you guys do that now as we lift up these equity issues more than ever before?
So the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors and the school board had a retreat shortly after both of our boards were elected for this 4-year term. And that retreat revolved around, or much of it revolved around, a resolution regarding One Fairfax and equity. And so the resolution really, flowed from that retreat, but prior to that retreat were years of really working together on the SCIP committee, looking at students and schools and children in Fairfax County. Some people may not really understand what exactly does equity mean. And so there's a cartoon that many of you may have already seen that just really says it all. You've got a tall kid, you've got a medium-sized kid, and then you've got a real short little kid. And they're all standing at a fence, and on the other side is a baseball game. And the tall kid can see just fine. The medium-sized kid, if he stands on his tiptoes, can sort of see over the top. The little kid can't see a thing. And so each child is given a stool to stand on. And each kid gets an equal size stool. So the tall kid doesn't really need it. He's towering then over the fence. The medium-sized kid can see much better. The little kid still can't see a thing. And so equity would have given each kid a different size stool so that they could all actually see over the fence. So it's not that we give everyone the same thing, it's that we give everyone the same opportunity in order to succeed to everyone's different potentials. We're all different, and we all need different things. But what we need to be doing in Fairfax County is providing everyone the opportunity to be able to succeed and to be able to achieve to their greatest potential that they're able to achieve. And that really is, what One Fairfax is all about. Stepping away from education, One Fairfax in transportation means that when we're building an extension of a road or widening a road, or when we are starting new bus service, that we're not lavishing improvements in one part of the county and not paying attention sufficiently to another part of the county. So that everyone has the opportunity to be able to use transportation in a way that is going to work in their community. It means health. And when we are looking at rec centers, or when we are looking at building athletic trails, that we're making sure that we're providing those sorts of things to all parts of Fairfax County in the way that is best going to serve those different parts of the county. So it's looking at things through an equity lens. How do we make sure that everyone has the opportunity to succeed? We too appointed a new equity officer, Carla Bruce, and it is her job to work with the schools and to work with the community to make sure that when we're doing anything, when we're adopting a new comprehensive land use plan, when we're looking at a new policy regarding public safety, that we're looking at that through the lens of equity. Are we providing opportunity? Are we being fair to all parts of Fairfax County?
I think the question also had us to think a little bit about 1 year from now, and I think maybe 10 years from now. Those are the two parts of the question that have been kind of running around in my head. I hope that in the next year, what we will see is not only those that work in Fairfax County government or in Fairfax County public schools, but organizations and members of the community will start asking the question, is this accessible? Is it accessible to people with disabilities? Is it accessible to people who maybe speak another language or who may have different, are our services accessible? And if they're not, what do we do about it? And who do we speak to about that? But the 10 years from now, all I can think about is my kids. My daughters who are 18 and 20. When they're 28 and 30, if they can still afford to live in Fairfax County with me in my basement or something. But if they're still in Fairfax County, have we prepared them as parents for that One Fairfax philosophy? Have we given them opportunities now as kids to interact, to support, to share with children who are different from them? And are we creating those, and maybe that's the message for PTA. How do, you all are PTA, so how does PTA create opportunities for students? And I think of some of the activities that my own kids have been involved in, like the Buddies program, which matches typical students with students with disabilities who to work together and to have activities, high school activities, and how well do we provide those opportunities for our children today? Because in 10 years, they're going to be the ones living One Fairfax, right? They're going to be the ones who are going to be supporting all of these ideas, the philosophy that's been passed now. So I think that's the question. What are we going to do to help them out 10 years from now?
Family and Student Ombudsman Office was created in FCPS. Can you tell us the role of this office and how this office supports students and families?
We probably should start with Armando.
Well, we can start with how it came about.
Okay, well, I will tell you that I am absolutely thrilled to have the ombudsman office and the ombudsman position. This was something that I had advocated for myself for many years, and Dr. Brabrand did it, and he picked an excellent ombudsman, and he's rocking and rolling already. Brand new, August 1st, is that when the office opened?
Well, we started,
Yeah, when we started taking cases. One of the reasons I felt that it was really important and that I'm so excited about this position, those of us in this room are pretty sophisticated when it comes to going on the internet and going to a website. I know as a parent, I would go to the FCPS website and it would say, little tiny thing at the bottom that says, contact us. And you click on this and there was a long list of every place you could go. And so okay, well, what I'm looking for is GT services. Well, if you don't know that it's not gifted and talented anymore, it's now advanced academics, you're out of luck. So one of the things that I felt was really important for the ombudsman was just to have a place where people could go if they didn't know where to go. And one of the things the ombudsman can do is say, okay, I know exactly who can deal with your issue, with your problem, who can get you information. Maybe it's saying, okay, here's who at your school you need to talk to. If you haven't talked to that person in your school, do that first. Maybe you need to sit down with the principal, maybe not. Maybe you need to talk to somebody in special services. Maybe that's who can handle your problem. And sometimes it's just knowing where to go. There are other issues, of course, that are more complicated, and then the ombudsman can help with those issues that are more complicated, that need to involve more people. But I think it's important also to have, and I've talked to Mr. Perry about this, I think it's important to have a base there. That it's not just an office. I don't know about you, but when I go to a business, say, and they just give me a form to fill out, and they say, okay, we'll get back to you, give me your name, give me your address, give me your email, someplace, it just seems like to go into a hole someplace. I don't really expect to hear much back. But if I see a person there, yes, this is the person that you're going to be directed to, and that person is going to make sure that you get answered. I think it's going to enable people to really connect with the school. So I think this is going to be an incredible positive change for our school system to actually invite people to say, if you don't know where to go, here's who can help you. So I'm thrilled with this addition. I want to thank Dr. Brabrand for getting it done. He just did it. Good for him. And I want to thank Mr. Perry because I know you've already been very, very active. Mr. Perry and I sat down to talk about all the things he's already doing. So I'm just very excited about it, and I think that this will help with our family engagement to a tremendous extent.
I'll just briefly say that this is a large system. It can be hard to navigate. Some people have navigated and some haven't navigated, they need help. Some have navigated and have become frustrated. Some people have been here a long time and have been frustrated a long time and don't feel they've been listened to. The ombudsman is a way to try to do all those things, help in navigation, but also help with those who are frustrated and think that Fairfax is just too big to be able to listen to the individual needs of a single parent or family. The research, only a few districts are doing this, but it's spreading, and the districts that are doing it report an overall, this is why I decided what can we lose? An overall drop in overall parent complaints to schools, to school principal offices, to school central offices. The presence of a neutral third party actually changes the behaviors of the complaints between both the parents and the schools. you know what I mean? It's almost like if you know you're gonna go talk to someone and somebody else will be over there to be able to observe it, it changes the way it's going to, I mean, you know, Einstein did theories about whether you observe the star, whether it changed the relative position. So this is the Einstein theory of parent-school relations. Does having an ombudsman's presence actually change the way the conversation? Because the principals all know now if Armando is here, and that parents can go, you know what? I will be speaking to the ombudsman. I'm just saying. So how will that change the kind of conversations that we have? So I'm excited about it. It's new, but it's time to try some new things. Just like I've shared the PTA, we need to do that too. This is another way, and he'll be reporting out at the end of the year, a more formal report and giving us trends. What are the trends that we're hearing about? Where are the concerns at? Or maybe it's all blows. Oh my gosh, I wanted to tell the parent ombudsman, this is something really fantastic. How can we do more of it? So it's a year. We're starting now, and we'll learn more about it as we do. Okay, that hasn't happened yet.
I'm still waiting for that phone call.
We have to recognize not everyone has felt the equity lens. Not everyone has felt Fairfax has been that premier school system for their child or their family. And how do we create room for that conversation? And Armando and that office, that's what this work is about.
So I'm going to pass it to Armando. I had nothing to do with creating this position. Although I will say, Fairfax County is a big county, geographically, a large population, and we can be confusing. So when someone is trying to deal with land use, when someone is trying to deal with human services, you know, we too in Fairfax County, the general side of the county, have an ombudsman, so that you know, a church or an individual or a civic association, if they're trying to build something or do something, you know, they're actually able to reach a real person, you know, who can sort of head them off at the pass if they're about to do something that is going to be more complicated than they actually realize, and help them guide them through a process. So we do that with human services, and we also do that in the area of development, growth, building, and so I will turn things over to Armando, who can talk a little bit more about this position.
Thank you. So, just a little disclosure about myself. So this is my 23rd year in Fairfax County Public Schools as an employee, and I was a parent for 16 years. And even with all of that experience, our system is so big, with 190,000 students, 200 schools. Sometimes I found myself thinking, who do I call for this, right? For whether it's transportation or whatever it might be. So that's why I'm so excited to be in this position. So the elevator speech is, my job is to work with parents and students, anybody who really calls my office. We have members of the community who sometimes call. We even have employees, and sometimes I'll even talk to them a little bit. But it's family and student ombudsman, and the role is to help the parent, help the student understand how does FCPS work, and then connect them so that they can get the best information and make the best decisions so they can advocate for themselves if it's a student or for their child. Okay? It's about connecting. I mentioned before those connections. That's what it's about. It's about helping parents find the way. Right? Now, if you have in your handout a little sheet that has a QR code, that takes you right to our website. Okay, so it tells you a little bit more. But there are 4 ideas that I want to share with you real quickly about the ombudsman, and I might give you an example. Number 1, our office is confidential. So when a parent calls, I don't turn around and then call the principal and say, hey, I just got a call from so-and-so who's really upset about something or who wants to know why. I do have some rules, as you can imagine. If somebody's in danger, or if there's an abuse or harassment situation, I don't have legal latitude there. I've got to act to keep kids safe. So I don't think any of you would balk at that. But I've had parents who've shared some of their frustration, and it's important for them to know that when they share it, it stays with me. Secondly, I'm independent. Our office is independent, which means We can help a parent with any topic that relates to FCPS. It might be transportation or enrollment, special education, anything. Some of you might have had the experience, you call one particular office and they say, oh, sorry, that's not ours. And you say, well, who do we talk to? And they say, I don't know. My job as ombudsman is to find out. If I don't know who it is, I'll say to you, I'm going to find out and I'm going to get back to you by such and such a date. And as Ms. Evans said, sometimes it's just knowing who that person is. By the way, we did have a picture of the office staff on the brochure. Both of us. We have 2 staff members in my office. Thank you. So we are that person who may go out, and because we're independent, we can touch on any topic in FCPS. So you're not going to get from my office, you will never get from my office, oh, sorry, that's not my FCPS department. They're all my FCPS department because none of them are my FCPS department, if that makes any sense, right? So that we're independent, we are impartial, which means that I'm only listening to what the parent is sharing, but I don't have the whole picture. My goal is to find out what is it the parent is looking to do and try to help them figure out the path or where do they find out the information that they need, okay? But this is kind of like my home because I have 3 teenage daughters. I have, well, one's 20 now. I have absolutely 0 authority at home and now at work. I don't have any power. I can't change any principal's decision. I can't change any policy that's established by the school board or a practice. What I can do is help a parent figure out how to navigate the system, and then, as Dr. Brabrand said, be able to report to leadership and to school board, here are trends that I'm seeing. I'm receiving a number of calls from parents who are sharing a concern in this particular area. That kind of goes back to what we were talking about before, asking the question, is it equitable? Is it accessible? And if there are a number of questions, what that should do at the very least is force us to say, let's think about this. What could we possibly change? What might we possibly have to address? So that's that impartiality. I don't fix anybody's problems, although one of my girls would give me a pair of Mr. Fix-It socks, but that doesn't work. But it's about how do I help the parent figure out the path they want to go. And then finally, we're informal, which means that I don't do formal investigations, I don't make judgments, or, parents still have all of their rights to be able to file formal complaints, right? If they want to talk to the regional assistant superintendent if it's about a school, or assistant superintendent for a particular department, or they have special education appeal rights. I mean, you still have all of that. My job, and this is kind of what I think Scott was getting to, is if there's somebody who can help you informally, that can help solve the conflict before it gets to the point of being a formal complaint, right? Sorry, I wrote myself a couple of notes. So, what happens when somebody contacts us? Well, they can contact us by phone, by email, you got them there, or on our website, you've got the QR code to go to our website, you can submit a question there. And so that information comes to my office, and then we get back to parents. When we talk to parents, first we listen. That's gotta be number one, is listening to the parents' concerns, what their perspective is of the situation. Then we ask some questions so that I can help understand a little bit better, and what has already been done, right? What steps has the parent already taken, if any? And if they haven't taken a particular step, what might be the obstacle? Because sometimes I don't feel comfortable talking to the principal because I don't speak English very well. Oh, let me help you with that. We have translation services. And so my job is to help remove some of those barriers, which we use in our own office. I've had parents contact me who speak Amharic, others who speak Korean, a number of other languages. In our office, we happen to have 2 Spanish speakers, so that helps. But to be able to communicate and use language services so that any parent can contact our office, and that's incredibly important to us. I don't think we're going to do that, that's okay. I'm glad it's part of the question. And then, after we listen, we want to understand from the parent, what do you want to achieve? Because being impartial, it's not what I want for your child. As a principal, that used to be my job. My job was to say to a parent, here are all of your options. I really think this one will be best for your child. But I could say that because I knew the child, I knew the situation, I knew what was available. In this case, it's just about asking parents, what do you want, and trying to help them find out where do you go to get there. So I guess that's kind of a summary of my job. What I want to ask for you all is thinking about how to get the word out. That's kind of what we're doing. We just opened up, as Ms. Evans said, in August. We started July 1st creating all of our procedures, and then August we started taking concerns. So here's what I would love, is every time I meet, I've met with SEPTA, I've met with FCCPTA, I think I got all the C's in there. I've met with a number of community organizations. If you know of a community organization that serves parents that you think would be helpful for me to come out and talk about the Office of the Ombudsman, shoot me an email at ombudsman@fcps. And we have 140 elementary schools. We only have 260 days of work. I cannot visit every school in a year. But if you, in your pyramid, would want to get together an evening and say, I'll pick on Falls Church. If the 6 elementary schools in the Falls Church pyramid would like to come together and have, well, that would be about, 26 meetings. I could do that, right? So that might be something that I'd be open to if all of your PTAs in your pyramid would want to get together one night, pick one school, and I'll come out and share with parents. But please get the word out, and if there's a way I can get the word out, if you know of a community group, whether it's your host of worship, community organization, I'd be happy to come out. Okay? Is that? All right.
Based on time, we're going to take a few questions from the audience, and I'll come with the microphone for you if there are any questions that you would like to ask.
Hi. The position sounds great, but I know a big part of your position is going to be to work yourself sort of out of a lot of things and to look at what communication looks like. So I was wondering, in your communication plan, how you might correspond with the parent liaisons. Although I don't believe every school has one, but it seems to me, I know we're talking about relationships and how the one-on-one, now this extra layer, which in some cases I understand why it would be needed, but I wonder how you would work with the parent liaisons.
Great question.
Well, actually, my plan is to expand my office. I gotta get the data to support spending extra money. But to your point, is a very valid one. So I've already presented to all the parent liaisons. You're right, there are 180 parent liaisons, but 200 schools, and some of them have multiple parent liaisons. So I've already gone out to parent liaisons and shared about my office, and they have already started contacting me and invited me to certain schools. So fortunately, I've already met with them. I've also met with your school principals to let them know that we're available, and we're reaching out to all of the departments. It's about reaching out to as many folks as possible to get the word out. My goal is that we may always still have an ombudsman's office to help parents, because we're always going to have new parents. Right? That's what our business is. It's about bringing people in every generation. Now, I won't be here for a generation, but that's the idea. There will always be a need to have some place to go to get assistance.
So I think I hear that parent liaisons are informed and empowered to bring the information back.
Absolutely.
So very streamlined.
Yes, and then just part of the outreach, the communication is also, we've just sent off our brochure to be translated. And this was purposeful. I have an English brochure, but I haven't distributed it to schools yet because I don't have the 7 language translations yet. And when we're going to talk about equity, our decision is I will send it out when we have them all ready. Because it's not a message of equity to say, oh, here's a copy in English that you can't read, but there's more coming later. So we're going to be sending them out, and they should be back next week, translated, then we have to print them, and we're going out. We're on YouTube. Some of you might have seen the YouTube message in English and in Spanish, and so it's an ongoing, but I'm always open to ideas for communication, which is why I say, let me know if there's a group you can come to. Did I kind of answer that question?
Yes.
Thank you.
So I had a question. Is there a county group working group that works on family engagement as well as the One Fairfax initiative, where maybe some of us PTA leaders can get involved with?
So on, let's see, family engagement. Trying to think of, we do have an office of family services. And I'm trying to think of a particular place where, where I could lead you.
So I'm going to answer that one. I'm in the Office of Professional Learning and Family Engagement. I'm the coordinator for Family and School Partnerships. So my office is responsible for family engagement throughout Fairfax County. We have a host of opportunities, initiatives. We work with all the schools to help with outreach and engaging all families. So you can contact me, contact your parent liaisons at your schools to reach out to our office. We have family engagement region reps who represent, and they're all over there. They support the schools at each region. And we also work with neighborhood and community services on the community engagement. We do a lot of collaborations and partnerships with that office. So that was kind of to respond to that question about family engagement.
Great answer.
Hi, thank you very much for being here and for all of the work that y'all have done, as well as some of the increases in budgets we have seen recently. So before I ask that question, I want to say thank you. But I think the biggest question that a lot of us from PTA leadership get is that a lot of the calls we get are, my class size is too big. We lost a special ed teacher. Why doesn't my school have flex or immersion? Or we talk about equity, but there's not enough money to go around and really do everything that we would all like to do. So my question is, the fun one, how do we really implement equity to provide opportunities for all of our students and all of our schools with limited funds? So really, I guess this goes to Superintendent Reardon and to Senator Bola.
In the beginning, on day one, the earth was created. No, listen.
I said thank you first.
No, you didn't say thank you. With the support of the Board of Supervisors, we had the first fully funded school budget since 1995. That's great collaboration between the school board and the Board of Supervisors, and so I think there will be more, not less, opportunities for that kind of collaboration to bear fruit. In Fairfax, we want everything, everywhere, every minute. Part of the equity conversation is putting the information out there and then starting to say, under what conditions can these things happen? Do they involve some trade-offs? They might. They may involve being clearer about what are our core promises, what will we guarantee. See, I don't think we've been clear yet. What are we going to guarantee in every school? It's base. Like, you go to McDonald's, you can order a cheeseburger at every McDonald's. I don't know if you knew this, and I didn't know it. My college roommate ended up moving. He was from New York, but he moved up to Boston, and then he married someone who's his in-laws. He married someone, and the in-laws had a place in New Hampshire. I went to a McDonald's in New Hampshire. The McDonald's in New Hampshire on the value meal had lobster rolls. I didn't even know what a lobster roll was. I didn't know what lobster was. But McDonald's has a lobster roll, and then some places in Maryland have crab cakes. We've got to do that kind of thing in Fairfax. What's core that every kid is going to be able to get no matter where they're at in a Fairfax County public school? And then we got to figure out a little bit of, well, some schools want, and I mean, I'm just being honest, even like world languages. You want a lobster roll over here? Can we offer Chinese language in every elementary school in Fairfax County? No, we can't. We can't staff it. It's expensive. And we don't believe we have the numbers for demand. Now, we can offer a whole lot more Spanish immersion, because we have a lot of Latino kids. And immersion's a popular program we have wait lists for in our immersion programs right now. We have a Korean immersion at Centerville Elementary. We have a large Korean population. So we've got to start to unwrap those conversations a little bit more. What's the base everybody's going to get? And then what are things, there's equity if you want this opportunity. We have academies at high school where you can go get something specialized. But guess what? Our staffing's been flat for 10 years. So not everybody gets in. Not everybody wants to lose a period in their base school. So we've got to start to be clearer about what our core promises are, and then how to access it if, hey, it's not here, but you want to. Maybe there is a way to do it and be clear about what that path is. So that's what I would share. Sandy, do you want to add to it?
I do, but,
So, at the same retreat, actually, where we talked about the One Fairfax resolution, we also talked about why is it so hard every year when we are adopting a budget, where the school board and the board of supervisors are at war? And we seem to have a disconnect. And that's not okay. It's not healthy. And so we created a budget development committee, which consists of 2 members of the board of supervisors, myself as chairman, and the chairman of the budget committee, Jeff McKay, and likewise on the school board. So the chairman of the school board and the budget chairman of the school board. And way before a budget is ever on the table, that group starts to talk about working also with our 2 boards. What are our biggest priorities? And what we've really been trying to achieve, especially, is teachers' pay, competitive pay for our teachers, but other programs as well. And so understanding, number 1, what is it we're trying to do? Number 2, let's be realistic about what's happening in the economy, and what do we anticipate as far as budget growth, potential budget growth? Is this a recession year, or are we starting to see increases in property values that may make it easier for us to fund and increase programs during this particular year where we couldn't previously? And having those discussions way early gives us a realistic look of what we want to do and what we think we can afford, and then knowing that what can we do to get there. And I really think it's been a new day as far as a real collaboration between the school board and the board of supervisors.
thank you, Chairman Golden. I'll pick up on that. I agree with you that the earlier conversations have made a huge difference, so we all understand each other. I was honored last year to serve as the school board's budget chair, so I was one of those that was part of this conversation. And also the full boards, we starting earlier now with getting both boards together so we all understand where we stand and what we can expect, and have those conversations. Last year, the school board made very clear our top priority was getting our teacher salary scales to where they needed to be, and that required a big investment. And that was something that the Board of Supervisors fully supported, and so we worked together on that, and the early conversations helped with our understanding each other's priorities as well. I want to go back to something that Dr. Brabrand said about where is the equity, what are our core things, but it goes beyond that. I'll give you an example. A couple of years ago, I discovered that there was a student at one of my high schools who was not able to get a high-level math course because it wasn't offered at his high school. And it wasn't offered at the next high school over. And Dr. Brabrand was not the superintendent, and this was maybe 3 years ago. To me, that's equity. Just because a student is at that high school, they have to be able to have access. When it comes to math, if you're ready for that highest level math course, we have an obligation as a school system to find a way for that student to get that math course. And whether that's transporting to another school, whether it's doing it online, whether it's bringing them here to this school, we have an obligation for that. And to my mind, that's not negotiable. To me, that's equity. We can't tell a student, you can't have a high-level math course because of the high school that you go to. World languages is a little different because we have a whole alphabet soup of world languages, some at the elementary, some at the middle, some at the high, and we have, at Falls Church High School, is the first and only Vietnamese language course, in the state of Virginia, we're very proud of that, but we can't have that in every high school. So that's a little bit different. We do need to pick and choose with some of the world languages offerings. I do think we need to get to the point where every student in our elementary schools has access, one way or another, to a world language. That is one of the goals that the school board has set, that every child will be fluent in 2 languages by the time they graduate. So we need to start that early, and but we're still working on that. I will also mention that we are working on one-to-one at this point with computers and with internet access. This is another matter of equity as well. We need to make sure that all of our students have access to the internet and to devices, so they can do their homework, so they can have access. We as a board just decided that next year we are going to have one-to-one at all of our high schools. That's where we're starting. I actually I was the one board member that had a slightly different view of this. I felt we should have started with those schools that needed it the most, regardless of level. That was another way we could have done it by pyramid, and I thought we should, but the board as a whole felt, no, we need to get it done at the high school level first. And so then we will go, once we get that done and make sure that we understand how to do it right, then we'll go to the middle school level and hopefully eventually to the elementary school level. But I think that's a critical issue today. I mean, imagine if your student didn't have access to the internet, or imagine if your student didn't have access to a device that the only way was at a library which has operating hours. We are doing other things as well. We're not doing just one-to-one. Some of these schools that had backpack, what they call the backpack program, those devices are going to go down to the middle school level, I'm told. We also have something called MiFi, where students can take something home, and so if they don't have internet access, they can get it. So we are doing other things as well. But to my mind, that's also a critical issue, to make sure that all of our students have internet access and access to devices. It would be like, 40 years ago saying, well, some of our students are having a textbook, and well, you don't get one. So.
Early childhood education, school readiness, and that's a perfect example of where the county and the schools need to really be locked at the hip, joined at the hip, trying to make sure that kids throughout Fairfax County come to school ready to learn. And so early childhood education, preschool, is provided in a number of different ways, including the private sector. The private sector, Head Start, county programs, school programs, but if that is a priority, and it is, for the county and for the school system, we need to work together and find ways to make that happen. So, and that is a perfect example of equity. Again, for many families, they take care of early childhood education themselves. But for so many other families, they may not be able to afford or may not be able to have access to that. And so kids come to school in different states of readiness, and that's not okay.
Thank you. Is this working? Am I on? Okay. As the great presenter Nina Thomas once said, in the interest of time, I will slide my voice in. That was great.